Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Outtakes from Hobby Hotline a couple Saturdays ago. I like to let it be released now through the For Collectors Network. A lot of participation on the live show. Highly recommend you listen to it when it comes out, which is every Saturday morning. And it's video. So thank you, sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So thanks especially to Dan, Vintage Baseball Card, and Orlando Collector's Dream. So enjoy it, and here it is.
We were going to talk about grading Pokemon cards exceeding sports cards, which happened this year.
I've been going to some card shows lately, and it seems like they're having more Pokemon tables than ever before.
If I went to a card show that had 200 tables, and all 200 tables were vintage or sports cards, whatever, I think, hey, that's going to be a great show. Okay, same show, and instead of 200 tables, there's 400 tables. Same 200 from before, but another 200 Pokemon and TCG guys. It may be a little bit bigger crowd, but I think they're bringing some energy, and I hope many of them will migrate. What I don't want to see is a shrinkage in the sports area. The increase in Pokemon, eventually, I'm hoping that's going to be a positive.
The experience at shows can be a little off-putting because it's out of your element, but in terms of just the money coming into the hobby, if the grading companies are making lots of money grading Pokemon cards and that's helping them improve their business, then yeah, I'm all for it also.
It's not taking money from, it's new money coming in. It's different money. It's not like if you were set up at a show and you thought, I didn't do well at this show. It's not because of the Pokemon dealers. If people want Pokemon, then go to those guys. You need to market your own stuff. If our hobby of sports card collecting is doing well, then these other ancillary hobbies, I hope they keep flourishing. But we need to mind our own garden.
Yeah, it's new money coming in, new collectors that maybe have never been in the hobby before. I do see some sports guys getting into Pokemon where they have a few Pokemon in their taste, but it's all new people coming in, new money coming in, and I see a lot younger crowd and a lot more kids getting involved in the Pokemon. It's a good thing. The more they get into that, maybe they'll move into sports later on. My concern is it a bubble that's going to burst.
The junk slab comments people make about sports cards, do they not equally or more apply to Pokemon? They're grading everything, it seems like. That's how the numbers are getting so big. They're not all Charizard and Pikachu. They're grading a wide range of stuff, just like in sports. If you grade lower level stuff that later is not worth as much as what it costs to slab it, it gives people a bad taste in their mouth. Now, whether that's Pokemon or sports cards, they need to wise up.
Pokemon cards are a lot easier to grade, too. They have rounded corners. PSA is happy to get more of those. It's easier for them to go ahead and slab them up pretty quickly and move through those 1.5 million cards they're grading every month.
My kids are all in their mid-20s now, but back when they were kids, they were Pokemon people. They had the games, and then they had cards they were all played with. And they moved on. I've always thought of Pokemon as a little kids thing, because that's what my kids did. And then they grew up.
I was watching the news yesterday, the local news, and they had a reporter over at the Comic-Con, which is happening now in New York. Yep. And that place was packed. It seemed like the National to me. And of course, they get all dressed up, but they were showing all the cards, and there were Pokemon and TCG and all of those games. And anything that brings more attention to the hobby, I think it's a good thing. It's bringing new people into this hobby and more collectors. I'll stay in my lane, but it's good to see the young guys coming in and different groups of people.
Interesting comment. Rex is a savvy business guy. If he's correct, then that's not a bad thing, because baseball cards did not have a bubble the first year or two of COVID. It peaked. It had a big surge, let's call it, and things went to world record prices at that time. Then the next couple of years, it moderated. Now it's back again. So if Rex is correct, then right now we're in that surge for Pokemon, and then it may go down more reasonable establish a plateau, and then continue to grow. I think it's here to stay. There's just too many people who think it's a fun thing, and it's rewarding. If somebody walks in the door and they're 15 or 25 or 35 or 45, and if they can turn right for sports and turn left for Pokemon, we got to figure out why they want to turn left instead of right. Is there something that is less appealing? I don't think so, but what are they going for that we don't have?
My kids, my boys, and my daughters, who were also into Pokemon, decided to start collecting Pokemon cards, basically because it brings back great memories from their childhood, which is part of the reason we're all collecting baseball cards. So there's some of it to that. But like the 12, 13, 14-year-old kids with the Zion boxes running around, I don't know what the motivation is, why they would turn to that instead of sports.
There are no number cards in Pokemon. And there's a Pokemon card with a Pikachu hat or something on there. There's 40,000 of those cards graded PSA 10s. 40,000. And that card is over $1,000. You would think that with so many of those graded PSA 10, it wouldn't be worth that much. I don't think there's any baseball card that matches that up. But apparently in Pokemon, it's more the nostalgia, the look. They want to have that card no matter how many they're out there. So I think it's a different world. And hopefully we can get some of those people to turn our way a little bit in the future.
The other topic was Topps Regain's NBA trading card license, which started on October 1st after having lost it, I guess, in 2010, I think. Topps and Fanatics now have all the licenses, and it reeks of the days when Topps had a monopoly from 1956 to 1981, the card wars of the golden age, and what it did, positive or negative for the hobby.
Remember what happened when Bowman and Topps started? The best era for me in baseball cards were the early 50s, where Bowman and Topps were competing, and the 52 Topps came out, and then 53 Bowman came out, which is probably the best set Bowman ever brought out. And Topps came back with another great issue, and they were competing back and forth. Then when Topps got into the 60s, it became bland. And if you look at some of the cards from 60, 67, 68, 69, they used a lot of the same photos, same pictures, and they got stale there. My concern, are they going to just not innovate? And then when 89 Upper Deck came out, then Topps had to innovate with the Stadium Club, and then with the Topps Finest, the refractors started coming out in 93. I think that was because of Gunrus and all the other guys that came in to the hobby that forced Topps to innovate a lot more than they had before, especially with the refractors in 93. So my concern is what's going to happen now. I think in a few months, they're going to start with the football.
I just want to bring a different perspective because I don't think Pokemon is having any trouble with only having one licensee. When I look back historically over the last 30 or 40 years, there have been periods of not much innovation, but there have also been periods of over-innovation. When you have multiple licensees, they're each trying to out-produce, out-innovate, out-create, outdo each other, almost to absurd levels, which is not necessarily good for the customer. Why do we think we don't have serial numbered cards with Pokemon? They don't need to. But the serial number craze started with numbering to 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. It's down now to, if it's not a one of one. So I think over innovation, it's hard to think about that, except you look in the early 90s when you had 13 football licensees, there's some crazy stuff there. And it was survival of the fittest, but a lot of companies went out of business. So I want Panini to still make cards. I want them to make them to the best of their ability, to the best of the licensing capability that they have. But the leagues have determined that they are better served by having one licensee for the three major sports. And they've cast their lot with Fanatics, which owns Topps, which is probably the preeminent historical brand in the hobby. So I don't see it as all bad. But what, guys, we don't have a vote.
We have a pocketbook, so that's a vote. The best years for sports cards are probably like 53, 54, when you had both going at each other, doing their best products. Even regional issues, you get your Red Hearts. You had a really good year in 1953 and again in 1954 for baseball cards. But one of the worst times for baseball cards in my book is 81, 82, 83, when Fleer is just putting out tons of stuff and it's total garbage. And then you get Donruss and all that stuff. And for the 80s baseball, the beginning of the junk wax era, you just, as Dr. Jim said, they're just flooding the market with junk. And in that sense, maybe having one license isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, Topps got a little stale, but Topps in the 70s was pretty freaking cool. They had the only license, and that's my era, that 70 to 75, 76. And they did a nice job back then. There's two sides to the argument.
We talk about Coke and Pepsi, Hertz and Avis, where there's like a duopoly, two major companies that control some segment of business or industry. But most things are more like the 80-20 rule. There's one major player, and that's mostly been the case in the history of the hobby, that there was one major card set and the others were in a distant second. And 53, I think Bowman, Dan, was in second place. And the gap started widening in 54, 55, such that Topps picked him up. In 52, it may have been a fair fight, but 52 tipped the scales toward Topps. And like I say, a lot of these things are winner take all. And Fanatics is the last one standing for the complete licensed cards. But I think Panini can still put out some great cards. Leaf, Upper Deck, I think they'll be creative, but they'll be creative within those bounds.
Yeah, I think Leaf is being very creative as far as what they're coming out with the patch and the autos and combinations, not just sports, with a lot of different movies and shows and things like that. I like to see some of that innovation continue. And Panini, of course, they're going to continue. It's just a shame you won't be able to see the logos and the shirts or the teams and things like that on the cards.
The whole point, too much innovation is too many choices. Loving fewer choices, less than infinity, is rational. I want choices, but I don't want so many choices that I throw up my hands and I'm confused. And there are some products that are like that. And there have been some periods in the hobby where you got burned because there were too many choices, and some of them were not well thought out.
There's choices and then there's quality. When you're buying cards, you want a card that has quality to it. 1981 Fleer, that's not quality. I don't want that card in my collection. I'm not going to buy that product if it comes out with its. And so what you're talking about, essentially, I think what we're agreeing on is that you want somebody to put out product that you feel proud to go buy. And if there's too much, you're going to get a bunch of junk.
Long term, which of the cards are going to be more desirable in the long term? The ones that are officially licensed or the ones that are not? Which cards are the ones that the collectors are going to want to gravitate a little more towards?
It's more complicated than that, because we're talking about partially licensed and fully licensed. There's cards out there that are not licensed at all, custom cards. Who's to say that in 10 years, some super creative, highly artistic card that's a custom card is the key card that somebody wants of a player, because it's so ornate and so unique. So licensing in 10 years, who knows?
Competition does breed, in some respects, better products. As we saw in 52 and 53, ultimately the cream rises to the top.
It's more complicated than that. We're not barring somebody from entering. The leagues looked at the landscape and saw Panini, saw Topps, saw Upper Deck, and made a choice. It wasn't sight unseen. They saw the body of work and the potential and the bankroll and all that stuff and the marketing plan, and they made a choice. And it was preemptive. I'm not saying that. But it wasn't like there was a new company coming in and they wanted a chance.
They definitely saw the money, that's for sure.
Panini had 15 years of being the exclusive license, and frankly, I don't think they did a great job with it, but that's my opinion.
But maybe, Dan, there was a perception that they over-innovated in terms of taking things to extreme levels in terms of the parallels. Maybe that was something the league said, you know what? The Topps had a different approach where they give pack odds. There's a lot of distinctives between the approaches of the two companies. Topps prints to demand mostly, and Panini was doing the Dutch auction thing, which again was an innovation. They looked at that and they said, we're casting our lot with Fanatics.
I can't blame them. I mean, I would make the same choice. And I'd say it's really the big boy in the hobby right now. They're controlling pretty much everything, not just cards, but also apparel and everything else. So you can't blame the leagues for choosing them. Obviously, they're the ones with the most funds, and they're the ones that could probably do the best job for them. Agreed. Panini just got crazy with all these parallels, the same card over and over. Now you see some Panini even using AI to do the cards. I like to see actual photos. I don't like to see these AI things that they could put out there. They just don't look as good. These probably downtown. You can see some of them. You can't even tell the players' hands. It looks like they have 3 or 4 fingers. Hopefully that will improve and they can use actual photographs and not produce 20 parallels, 30 parallels from the same card.
The man in the house of cards.